This lesson is going to look at forks. And forks are simply one of the many tactics that can be used during a chess game to win material. A fork is attacking 2 or more pieces with 1 piece. So each piece, all 6 pieces, can perform a fork, and so we're going to take a quick look at all 6. Okay, so on the board we're looking at now, it's up for pawns. Pawns are going to be the ones forking. So the first pawn we're going to look at that can fork is that pawn right there. So how can that pawn fork 2 pieces at once? Well, if it moves up, then it's attacking the king and the queen, right? Okay, king, let's say the king moves over, and then the pawn can just take that queen. And, the king could take it, but it doesn't matter. You've already done the damage. And then the other scenario we have, this pawn can move up 1, and again is attacking 2 rooks, and this pawn doesn't even have anything supporting it, but it's able to attack both just because rooks can't move diagonally. And so when one of the rooks moves out of the way, the other rook gets taken. Okay, so that is our very first look at a pawn fork. Let's look at a little bit more difficult of an example. Okay, so in this case, again, we're looking for a pawn fork, and the pawn we're looking at is ultimately going to be that one. And so you have 2 options for trying to perform this pawn fork. One option is simply this pawn can move up 1 and is now attacking the king and the knight, and then when the king moves out of danger, the pawn could take that knight. Now another way you could try to do this would be instead of pushing the pawn immediately, you could actually try and take the rook. Now, if black was to take with the queen, then you could do the fork, and the queen would have to take, the rook would then have to take, and then the king could take. So that's another way to do that. But either way, the pawn fork is attacking 2 pieces at once. Okay, so I'm just going to do 2 examples for each piece. So those are examples of pawn forks. And so next we're going to move on to knights. And knights are actually the best pieces to do forks with because of the unusual way that they move. So on the board now we're looking at a knight fork, and at first, so we notice our 2 knights, and so black's going to be the first one to perform the fork. So let's see where that knight can go to attack multiple white pieces. Okay, jump there, and as we can see, it's attacking the rook, the king, and the other rook. And then, since the king's in danger, he'll have to move, and the knight can take the rook. Okay, now if it's white's turn to go, let's see where this knight can attack. So now you can probably see it already. The knight was to move there. It's attacking the bishop, or sorry, the queen and the king, and will win 1 because when the king gets out of the way, it's able to take the queen, right? Okay, so that's the knight fork, and again, let's just look at a slightly more difficult example of a knight fork. Currently on the board, so it's white's turn to move. So we're looking at that knight, and we're thinking where it can attack 2 pieces at once, and the knight can move where? Knight to there, and is now attacking the rook and attacking the queen. So in this situation, the queen moves somewhere. It doesn't really matter. Let's just say the queen moves there, just in case he's thinking of attacking the knight, but the knight's already decided where he's going, and he takes the rook. Okay, so that's another example of a knight fork. Okay, again, just going through these pretty quickly, just so that you get a basic understanding of all of them. So the next piece we're going to move on to is the bishop fork. Okay, and if you're looking at this board, well, of course, since it's bishop fork, we're looking at the bishop, and then trying to decide how to attack both of the pieces that are currently on the board for black. So how can that bishop get on that diagonal? And by going up, it is now attacking the king and the rook, and so of course when the king moves out of the way, the bishop is able to take the rook. Pretty easy. Okay, so again, we're going to look at a little bit more difficult of an example this time around. Okay, so now we're going to have each color is going to have its chance at a bishop fork. So in this case, it's white to move first, so we're looking at the bishop, of course. And so where does that bishop move? To fork two pieces at once. Then it goes up here, it takes this pawn, and once it does that, it is now attacking the knight and the king. So when the king moves out of danger, the bishop is able to take the knight. Okay, but black would have a fork in this case also. So again, looking at this black bishop. So where did that bishop go? Well, it simply does the same thing. It takes the pawn that was there and is now attacking the king and the rook. And so when the king moves out of danger, the bishop is able to take the rook. Okay, so I think we're probably understanding the idea. So we're going to keep plowing on ahead. Next up in our series is a rook fork. Okay, so we're looking, in this case, is white's going to be performing the fork. And so where can that rook go to attack both the bishop and the king? And he moves up, as we've seen already, attacking the bishop, attacking the king. King moves out of the way, rook takes the bishop. Okay, up next is a little bit more difficult example of a rook fork. Okay, so in this case it's black's turn to move, and so we target in on the black rook to see where it might go to attack two pieces at once. And after a brief look, we notice that if the rook comes there, it is now attacking the king and attacking the knight. And since the king's in check, the king moves out of danger, and the rook takes the knight. That is a rook fork. Up next is the queen. And the queen, since she can move in so many directions, has so many options for forking pieces. But we'll just look at one of them in this case. So the question becomes, where can this queen move to attack both the white king and the white rook? And so the queen chooses that spot right there, and when she does, she is now attacking the rook and the king. And when the king moves out of danger, the queen, the rook. Okay, up next is a slightly more advanced queen fork. And in this case, it's white's turn to move. So we're looking at the white queen. So where can the white queen go to attack two pieces at once? Well, she can't make a move that will attack the rook and the queen, because any move like that, the black queen would be able to take her. So she has to go somewhere where she can attack probably the king and the rook. And so if you think of those two pieces as being the ones that need to be attacked, then the answer becomes go there for check. And now it's attacking the king and attacking the rook. And so when the king moves out of the way, the queen took. Okay. And the last piece, which isn't often thought about for forking pieces, but it is a possible fork that you can do, is the king. So let's take a look at a king fork. Okay, in this case, we're going to be looking at white. So the white king, of course. So where can that king go to attack two pieces? Well, since the kings can't move very far, it's pretty easy to figure out where he can go to attack both of those pieces. The king simply moves over a square and is now attacking the knight and the rook. And since black can't save both, he'd probably choose to save the rook, and then when he does, the white king takes the knight. Okay, and our very last example of a king fork. In this case, it's black's turn to move, so we're looking at the black king. He's actually in check at this point, so by the white rook. So when the black king moves, he simply moves here and is now attacking the rook and the bishop. And again, in order to save the more valuable piece, white will save the rook, and then when he does, black can take the king, or black can take the bishop. That is our lesson on forks. Went through all 6 pieces. Thanks for watching.